what I've learned is, that some of the core competencies are actually to do with degrees of resilience, making sacrifices in terms of your time and priority calls, and actually facing the reality that you're often going to have to be the person on the spot to take responsibility or accountability for sometimes things that you don't directly control.
SC Media, our diamond sponsor, Arctic Wolf, and our sapphire sponsor, Cohesity, are proud to present this month's CISO Stories program. Each month, the CISO Stories program explores a cybersecurity topic selected by Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community and provides content that examines that topic from a variety of perspectives. Hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, best-selling author of the CISO Compass, the CISO Stories weekly podcast features content powered by the 1,100-plus members of the Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community. Listen to the CISO Stories podcast episodes at CISOstoriespodcast.com. The Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CSC. I am your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Spencer Mott, Chief Security Officer at Booking Holdings and Bookings.com. Welcome, Spencer.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. Very nice to be here, and hi, everyone.
Glad to have you here today, Spencer. So tell us, Spencer, before we get started, what attracted you to the cybersecurity field?
I had originally a career in law enforcement of 15 years. So in law enforcement, I actually noticed that criminals were moving increasingly to online crime to perpetrate their criminal activity. And I felt at the time, actually, that the police were a little bit behind the curve. So it was actually a forcing factor to get into technology and into cybercrime, if you like, and I took the leap, had an opportunity to take a career break, and that was in 1999, so in the last century, as they say. So I did take that leap, and it never ended up going back into the police service, and been enjoying a career in the commercial sector, working for large online companies now for the last 23 years.
Well, that must be very useful to have that police background and understanding law enforcement like you do in your current role.
Yeah, it was one set of skills, I would say, the legal and investigative process, so the curious mind, if you like, and then obviously interacting with people and interviewing criminals or interviewing witnesses. You learn a lot about people, and we all know that at the core of cybersecurity, whether it's the talent you hire or whether it's the adversary that you face, you have to understand how humans tick, and one logical step to that is how humans program machines to tick. So it felt like a logical step, although there was a big ramp up in terms of my technical skills that I spent a lot of time working on in those first few years.
Mm-hmm. Well, so today we're going to talk about, I love the title, do you really want to be a CISO? Which is an interesting question to ask since we're in close to 150 episodes now of CISO Stories. I've written a book called CISO Compass for CISOs, for people that want to go down the path. And now we're questioning, do you really want to be a CISO? So tell us about that.
Yeah, and Todd, you know how much I've leveraged your book, right? Both in terms of recommending it to people that are interested in the sector, but actually as a kind of instruction manual as well. It is exactly that, a compass. So I appreciate the book. But yeah, step forward from that is what I've learned in, 20 years of being a CISO. So I was one of the kind of early ones, right, when the brand first took off, if you like, and we've had many variations of C roles since then. But what I've learned is, that some of the core competencies are actually to do with degrees of resilience, making sacrifices in terms of your time and priority calls, and actually facing the reality that you're often going to have to be the person on the spot to take responsibility or accountability for sometimes things that you don't directly control. And, one of the discussions I like to have with people when, they're set on becoming a CISO is, do you really understand, all those things that perhaps no one's told you before about the role that you've either got to give up or that you have to kind of psychologically wrap your head around accepting as coming with the job title?
What are some of those things that you have to kind of give up?
Yeah, so I think, this isn't a 9 to 5 job. I know we all realize that, but it's really is a full-time job all the time. You have to be pretty much available. It doesn't matter how strong your bench is. Ultimately, the buck will stop with you in relation to certainly incidents, but increasingly you're expected as a CISO to have broad knowledge across the enterprise. And I think it's one of those unique roles where you're expected really to have a pretty deep understanding of everyone else's position and how business operates within their vertical. And yet, people don't necessarily need to understand your set of responsibilities. So, that's number one to accept is actually you're constantly going to be learning and you're constantly going to have to be driving yourself to get deep and knowledgeable about your business, more so than any other role. You're going to be a confidant for, the top of the house, as well as, kind of mentor, teacher, coach, and guide for rank and file throughout the organization. The other thing they don't tell you is, I would say, that the decisions that you'll be expected to make and the hot seats that you'll be expected to sit in are very stressful. They're big decisions. You have to provide advice that ultimately is going to come back on you, and that advice might not always be right. Naturally, you're going to be making it in good faith and with the information available, but sometimes you're going to get it wrong. And sometimes, the third factor I would say is, I think it comes with the territory. Occasionally, you're going to be potentially the fool person if a breach occurs, whether you controlled the set of circumstances that led to the breach or not. And even if you have a very strong defensible position, sometimes for the company to exit an incident in a clean manner, they have to have somewhat of a clearing of their house. And I think, that's hard for a lot of people to accept, right? Taking, effectively part responsibility for something they can control, but it's just a reality that comes with the role. So I think, resilience, understanding what the accountability is, and realizing the amount of sheer hard work is involved in keeping up with, the business, the technology, the threats, etc. So, yeah, that's the general roundup of it. But there's tons of upside as well.
The cybersecurity industry has an effectiveness problem. New technologies, vendors, and solutions emerge every year, yet we still see headlines filled with high-profile breaches. Designed to help you monitor, detect, respond, and recover from cyber attacks whenever and wherever they strike, Arctic Wolf provides the first cloud-native security operations platform, empowering organizations of any size to stand up to world-class security operations with a push of a button. Learn more about their suite of fully managed security operations solutions at CISOstoriespodcast.com/Arctic Wolf. So we've had, when we talk about the downside of a breach, we've had several high-profile CISOs on the CISO Stories podcast that we've interviewed lately. We had Tim Brown, who is the CISO for SolarWinds. We've had Jamil Farshi, who cleaned up the Equifax breach. And most recently, we had Joe Sullivan on from Uber. And we know what that story is about, and so when you say we're in the hot seat, those are really good examples of being in that hot seat, and CISOs. It's almost like a career objective, I guess, is not to have to be in that hot seat, right? To have to deal with that. How do you try to stay out of that hot seat with having that big breach?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And yeah, you're absolutely right. You're going to be in a version of a hot seat at some point in your career. So understanding both how you would present a defensible case, which is really, did you do your very best and promote the security organization the way it should be promoted, and actually persuade management that this makes good business sense as much as it makes good security sense, right? So just having trusted platforms, I think increasingly trusted companies are differentiated. So I think that kind of persuasive argument is important. I think, what you described, the different types of hot seats, I think if you can portray a strong, robust program and good decisions that were based on, a strong kind of moral and ethical compass as well as a big business compass, that seat might feel hot, but it's ultimately going to be bearable. And I think that's, a super important part of taking the title and the set of responsibilities, is to really do your best and have the full range of skills that is, persuasive, compelling, and probably the most important of all that I've learned throughout my career is always make sure you place yourself in a company that aligns with your own set of personal values, right? And that you are going to be able to deliver a security mission to its fullest in the job that you take. Otherwise, you're going to set yourself up not only for a really, really hot seat, but also, personal damage that you might never kind of recover from.
Well, I'm glad that you're doing that at booking.com, because that's my go-to site when I'm not using my normal hotel chain that I'm a loyalty member with. That's where I always go. And it's like, well, when you think about that, there's personal information there. There's where I'm traveling, where I'm staying, where I'm going to be. And that can be, regarded as very confidential, to track my movements and other people's movements and who's meeting who. And, there's really a lot more data there than just, what it looks like on the surface, if we dig into it, as to how useful that could be to somebody.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Todd. And if you've obviously sat and thought about it, I would volunteer that up, right? Because people don't realize that it's not just about, payment card information or personal information that you steal to commit fraud. It's actually about, where people stay, where they're going to be, their preferences. So it's real crown jewel stuff. We, acknowledge and accept the accountability that comes with that. And my CEO and his team absolutely get it, and back in the days of Yahoo, right, the paranoids, etc. It's, we have this kind of healthy paranoia all the time as to, how buttoned up are we, how secure are we, and is there some new technique or methodology that's going to put, our systems or our data at risk. So it's taken very, very seriously. It's been a massive investment over the last few years for sure. But then we've seen the threat profile as, throughout my career, I've seen it move, financial services, healthcare, and now, hospitality and travel is an interesting sector because of what you just described.
You said that that what was important for you is to make sure that you aligned with a company that had your values in mind. How do you do that when you're looking at a company? What things do you look for, and how do you determine that they really are that company? What sort of questions would you ask?
Yeah, it starts with when you're thinking of a move or you're looking for your next career step, is to put a ton of research into your target companies. If not, if you're aiming for an industry sector, then make inquiries about who are the leading companies, not only from a business perspective, but culturally. Some of the information you can kind of get from various online repositories, but really what I tend to do is look in my network once I've got a short list of companies, is start putting phone calls in and just literally going through a list and getting information about it. And then throughout the interview process, right, have those questions lined up. And, the questions would be really testing, in X scenario, what would be your response? What's the most important thing if you're a customer-centric company? How do you stack that up against, you've had an issue or a breach. How would you respond to that, and how would you show up to your customer and client base? All searching questions that you can kind of tease out. Where the executive team's head's at. I mean, within Booking.com, I always start with like the value statement of the company or the mission statement, and for Booking.com, it's we create value because we want everyone to experience the world, and we think that's a force for good. I mean, I think you look at recent events, right? If our theory is, and what resonated with me when I looked at Booking was, you could argue if people had a better understanding of each other's cultures and each other's countries, and thought of the world as a globe and one neighborhood rather than competing neighborhoods, perhaps we'd all get on a little bit better. And that was the starting point in terms of aligning with my values, and that was kind of what I heard when I spoke to people in the company. This sense of, it's not all about, we want a viable business, but we're not going to chase the dollar and forget, our responsibility to either society or the greater goal in terms of bringing people together and understanding each other.
I really like that, and I think that's dead on. We had a previous podcast by Ed Amoroso, and he was talking about he used to be the CISO for AT&T, and he was talking about I was thinking back to the statement that you made that, we're expected to know their business, but they really don't understand our business. And Ed was saying, well, it's not our job to teach them cybersecurity. He said, you don't walk into a board meeting and they don't start to train you on how to read a balance sheet or what an income statement is for, or what a debit and credit is, right? You're expected to know that as a board member, but we're still in this state where we're educating the rest of the workforce about cybersecurity. So what do you do in your organization to bring the knowledge of cybersecurity to the rest of the executives?
Yeah, and Ed's a great guy. He's kind of the CISO I aspired to be when he was at AT&T, and now he's obviously still very successful. So great guy. He's absolutely right. I think what we can do in terms of playing a role with the executive team is more broadly, rather than bits and bytes of security, cybersecurity is, how to manage risk more effectively in a kind of increasingly volatile world. And I always describe, cybersecurity is one in an ecosystem or universe of different risks. Sometimes it shows up in a very prominent way. And will be amplified because there's been some recent breach or some new attack methodologies been used. But in other times, there's other things going on in the world or at the company that would, play down the cybersecurity risk, although it's always going to be present. So this concept of how to manage risks in a proportionate way without bias or amplification is, for me, the education process. And that's very much aligned to just good business practice as well. I think it's also something that boards are very familiar with and executive teams are increasingly familiar with, enterprise risk management or, whatever title that you want to give it. But having cybersecurity be at that table as one of those risks that appears in the list of risks that the company needs to manage to be profitable and sustain itself.
What are you seeing around like investment with security now? Is there more pushback on security investment, or is that wallet wide open? What are you starting to see in your world?
Yeah, I think just if I just look at travel and hospitality sector, there's a ton of opportunity. We're actually going through, a pretty buoyant time off the back of COVID. We'll see how long that lasts, right? And, a lot of that's going to be subject to whatever the economic climate delivers. But yeah, as it relates to Booking.com and Booking Holdings, the portfolio company, whatever the necessary investment that needs to be made is being made. I mean, I put a case forward. It's judged professionally and on its own merits. And if it holds up, I'm given the money to do the right thing, which is why I stay with the company and why we had a discussion earlier about aligning to values. I never feel like, I'm cutting a corner or putting a customer at risk. Like any company, we grow our capabilities. We're never perfect, and we're always, chasing a pretty advanced adversary. I think generally, and rightly so, chief financial officers are looking for opportunities to consolidate technology and platforms, which is something we should be looking at anyway. Doesn't eliminate kind of boutique or niche solutions that solve specific problems. It's a pretty mix, set of a mix of different tools and technologies that we need. But yeah, we're absolutely looking, and now especially with the advent of more advanced AI with generative AI, etc., is there an opportunity to become more effective and efficient? And rather than throw that money back in the pot, there are other things that we would look to invest in that will make us stronger. So that story's still got to play out. So a little bit of pressure, but nothing that makes us do the wrong thing for our customers.
So you've mentioned, things about investment, you can have those investment constraints, that you've got long days, increasing regulations, that you're going to be the person on the hot seat for the breach. So why would anybody want this job?
Well, it takes a certain personality. That's for
Crazy?
sure. Yeah, crazy maybe. It has its rewards. I mean, let's be honest. It's a well-paid job. It's got amazing job security, especially if you can keep the company safe and secure, and you can survive the hot seat. And no day is the same. We can grow, in great teams that great young people that come and join our teams and learn the profession. It's very rewarding as a leader. And we get to work with the best technology. I mean, so much of our technology, whether we're fighting fraud, preventing a cyber attack, keeping, our travelers safe, really is cutting edge technology. We, make a point of working with, startups, mid-stage, et cetera, to look at the next evolution of what's coming. And that's super interesting as a technologist, but also as a kind of crime fighter, if you like, as well. And a people person. It's got all the ingredients that make it a great job. So, yeah, the benefits far outweigh the risks for me personally.
So there's been a lot of talk about stress and burnout and the CISO resignation and I've read articles on both sides and it's hard to say is it really more stressful than say the chief financial officer or the chief marketing officer or the CIO or are we just in that same pool? Where would you place the stress of the CISO?
Definitely more stressful than chief marketing officer. Come on, Todd. No, I think it is up there, if not more so. Yeah, sure, they're stressful jobs, but I'll be very transparent. There's been times where I felt like the pressure was overwhelming and that it started having impact on, the way I behaved and the decisions I've made. And you can't expect the company to be able to spot and resolve that for you every time. So a lot of it's to do with, self-management of your own health, both mental and physical health, which is the point I made earlier around talent and looking for resilient people, people that can sustain this degree of pressure as they increase their responsibilities and head towards that CISO role. There's nothing that can really prepare you better for this role than just being in the trenches with the hard school of knocks. It's just a reality. It's one thing to learn the craft, but another thing to be in there day in, day out, making big decisions, short notice with limited information. So you really, really have to manage your own situation and use everything that's offered to you or available to you. the full range of kind of, wellness products and services that you can glean and keep yourself healthy, eat well, exercise, socialize, and realize that, it's a job at the end of the day. And yeah, there are some professions where it is kind of life and death, but many others as well where it's, we're trying to protect commercial interests as well. So get a sense of proportionality around it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So this has been great, Spencer. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and the transparency that you provide for CISOs as to what this job is. What final advice would you give to new CISOs, emerging CISOs, current or experienced CISOs as they're going down this journey?
Yeah, I think with other professions as well, individuals are stronger when they're part of a network, so lean on each other. You'll find that, or I've found often, that the day job and just working on the team and with the tasks that you have can become all-consuming. My advice would be always to carve out time to have that conversation with a peer or with another person in the profession or someone like yourself. I mean, it's cathartic. The more you kind of share, the more you debate, the more you discuss, whether it's, professional issue or wellness issue, etc. That's the crutch that we all need to lean on. It's refreshing, and never lose sight of it, because you're actually going to really need it to get through and survive this role.
Well, that's great. And thanks a lot, Spencer. And thanks for what you do to protect a site that many of us use and other companies that many of us use today. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, back at you, Todd. Thanks for raising awareness and speaking to us. We love sharing our thoughts. And again, appreciate the book.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of the CISO Stories podcast. We want to say a special thank you to Arctic Wolf, our diamond sponsor, and Cohesity, our sapphire sponsor. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories podcast and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode.